Glad to be here. Glad to see all of you. It's been a busy week of celebration and acknowledgement. I know most of us here know that May 1st we think of as Lay Day. And for many people in the rest of the world, except for the United States and Canada, it's also when people celebrate Labor Day and honor all the workers that have contributed to making our world a better place. Then there was the first Thursday in May that was designated by our Congress as National Prayer Day. I was busy praying for peace. I hope everybody else was too. We need it. But you may not have been aware that Thursday, May 3rd, we celebrate World Press Freedom Day. That's an annual thing. It seems to me to be extremely important, where we honor and remember that freedom of the press and freedom of expression are fundamental rights. We seem to have forgotten that a little bit here, but it's great to have a day that makes us remember. And then, of course, what is today?
Cinco de
This is a historically significant but relatively minor holiday in Mexico. We celebrate it more here than the Mexicans do. It commemorates the Battle of Puebla when the Mexican army overthrew the French. But you know, we've morphed it. We've morphed it into a celebration of Mexican culture and heritage. In what my activist friend refers to dismissively as the food, fun, and fiesta approach to cultural celebration. And I have to agree with my friend. It's great to have an excuse to eat more chips and salsa and drink more beer. But I feel like we all need to dive a little bit deeper when we think about true cultural awareness and appreciation, and we continue to cultivate the truth of oneness. Because what all of these special days have in common is that each day gives us pause to celebrate each other, to highlight the commonalities that we all share that bind us together, while honoring the differences which make us unique as individual and equal participants and members of the human race. Or as our founder, Dr. Holmes, reminds us, if our human relations are to mean the most to us, we must sense that there is hidden within, around, and through each of us a divine presence manifesting itself in infinite variations. The same impulse, the same love, the same life, but never quite alike in any two persons. Out of unity comes multiplicity. And this is cause to celebrate, not cause to fear. Our theme of the month is caring compassionately for others. And it seems to me to be so appropriate as I look at all of your beautiful faces today. Because last Sunday, those of you who were with us know that Arthur, who's a beloved member of our spiritual community, was transported by ambulance to Hilo Medical Center because he had suffered a bit of a seizure. While he was being convinced that he needed to go, he was surrounded and stroked and supported and comforted and soothed by several of you as he waited for the ambulance. And then as I went right up after church, and I was waiting with Arthur in the ER, the phone started ringing, the beep started beeping for texts. So many of you texted or called me to check and see how Arthur was doing. And when I took him home, Susan Hicks, retired occupational therapist extraordinaire, was waiting for me at Arthur's house to help him to make his environment safer and easier to manage. Leigh is going over today to install a handheld shower I could just go on and on. But you know, some of you might be thinking, well, yeah, right, that's what we do. We care for each other. But for Arthur, the gifts of love and caring that were extended to him meant everything. He commented that he'd never been to a church where people made him feel like he was part of a family. And it made me proud. I'm proud to represent our spiritual Ohana, where love and acceptance for each other is so evident, and where people take action. They don't just speak about it. They act on it. Ernest Holmes wrote, every act of human affection and love, of generous giving, of receiving, of kindly relations with others, is an extension of the spirit of life flowing through us. Life, the great giver, and each one of us a distributor. This is a beautiful description of love in action. Right? Life is the great giver, and each one of us is the distributor. And I must say that I feel like all of you were wonderful distributors last week, because you actively modeled for Arthur what it means to be included, that principle of inclusion that we talk about so often on Sundays. Now I know we're all often faltering as human beings. We maybe don't always notice when someone is in need of our compassion, or maybe we rush to judgment in our narrowly prescribed and sometimes unexamined viewpoints of what constitutes right and wrong and good and evil. But I believe that it's the consciousness of oneness that we're all striving for. Because if it wasn't, we wouldn't keep coming back here. We wouldn't come back to a place where inclusion is promoted and valued, and where we're constantly encouraged to stretch ourselves through self-reflection and self-correction as we commit and continue this commitment to our spiritual journey. We know that if we lived life every day from the truth that we are all incarnations of the divine, presenting uniquely, and we have some unique people here, wonderfully unique, we know, and that we're bound together inseparable. If we knew this and we lived from this premise, the concept of otherness would just disappear. It wouldn't exist anymore. Inclusion, by definition, means that all parts participate in the whole. If this concept were to be embodied by all, exclusion would no longer be a word in our vocabulary. Living, moving, and having our being with the consciousness of oneness, all boundaries fall away. We recognize that all souls have emerged from the same origin, though we are infinite in our outer variations, in our way of expressing. We know at first appearance the human being is very different from a plant or an earthworm or the mountain or the planet, but are we so different? Our physical body is composed of solid matter and water. We all eat plants, fruits, seeds, some of us eat animals, and we drink water. We breathe in the air that was breathed by our neighbor, and we exhale it back on and pass it on to another neighbor. Every human body is composed of these same elements, so there may be a difference in the balance of minerals and the amount of water. That would be the only difference. Our genetic structure may be different from the next human, or family, or tribe, or culture, or race, but we are all part of the species Homo sapiens. What makes us different are our life experiences, our circumstances, the conditions under which we live. It is those differences that invite empathy and compassion. Deepak Chopra said that oneness consciousness is a state of enlightenment where we pierce the mask of illusion which creates separation and fragmentation. Behind the appearance of separation is one unified field of wholeness. Here, the seer and the scenery are one. The idea that the self is inextricably intertwined with the rest of the world can be found at the heart and soul of most religious and philosophical traditions. Here's one of the many profound examples. All my relations, those three words, all my relations, is a translation of a Lakota phrase that emphasizes that we are all connected to each other in this sacred web of life, including the ancestors who have passed, and children yet to be born, and every blade of grass and every drop of rain. Rita Long is one of the Lakota members of the International Council of Indigenous Grandmothers, 13 Indigenous grandmothers. She said that the phrase, all my relations, functions as a prayer. She advised, you think of everything in your prayers, even the birds and the insects. All my relations is a prayer in itself and covers the whole world. So that reminded me of another prayer, a Buddhist prayer, that includes the phrase, may all beings be happy, may all beings be peaceful, may all beings be free from suffering. In prayers such as these, we move from that sense of separation into the understanding of our deep connection to all that is. and to the importance of inclusion on our spiritual journey to encompassing wholeness. At the center of every hurricane is an eye, a single theoretical point in space where all forces of the storm are in perfect equilibrium. At the eye, there is peace, there is calm, there is serenity, and there is stillness. The storm of individual consciousness, of our individual consciousness, also possesses a center, called the center the eye of the storm. And as you surmise from this analogy, the eye of our consciousness is our wholeness and our spiritual connection. In spiritual context, wholeness is the energy of communion, of principle, of purpose, of non-resistance. Wholeness isn't outside of us, nor is it separate from us. It is the essence of our true nature and spiritual identity. And when we feel truly whole within ourselves, we are then able to transcend ourselves and see the greater picture. Abraham Maslow taught us that transcendence of self is the very highest and most inclusive or holistic level of human consciousness, where we behave and we relate as ends rather than as means, to oneself, to significant others, to human beings in general, to other species, to nature, and to the cosmos. Now I'm going to tell you a story, and this story begins with one man's dream, and this was his dream. He said the city was deserted, the streets were empty, the buildings were abandoned, some of them boarded up. There were only a dozen or so of us left. We had all gathered in one of the lounges of an upper floor of a vacant hotel to watch the surreal scene unfolding before us. The world was at war. All was darkness, except for the flashes of artillery and the explosions of bombs that eerily lit up the countryside. We watched what was happening around us in disbelief. The lights in the hotel suddenly flickered on, and we gave a small cheer for whoever had managed to get the generator to run. Because with the power on, we could open the exterior doors of the building once again. So several of us opted to go out, go into the streets and see if there was anyone who needed assistance. I searched street after street, but saw no one. The stillness in a place that was usually bustling with people and business weighed heavily in my ears. I decided to return to the hotel where everyone else was gathered. But when I was a few blocks away, I heard a faint call. I turned to look behind me, and I saw a small figure frantically waving as it ran down the street. I groaned inwardly as I recognized who or what it was. This figure was Hanuman, the town monkey. This pesky monkey drove me crazy. When he was around, he chattered incessantly. It was impossible to even think when Hanuman was around. He always wanted something, and he would drive people to distraction until he got it. He wasn't mean or bad. He was just a true pest. I cringed to imagine being confined in a building in our present situation with Hanuman there. So I pretended not to hear him, and I continued on toward the building. Behind me, I could hear him calling over and over. I peeked cautiously behind me, and I saw that Hanuman was catching up. He waved frantically and called out again. I hurried on to the building, and again pretended that I hadn't seen or heard him. As I went through the double doors into the building, Hanuman was close behind me. As he reached the doors that had just closed in front of him, I was safely inside with several others who had returned from their searches. I seemed to be the only one who could see Hanuman go. I looked out the doors, and my heart nearly broke. Hanuman was there with his hands on the glass, sliding down to the ground. He was sobbing uncontrollably. I could not bear to see him like that. I asked one of the others there to please open the doors again. As the doors began to pull apart, Hanuman looked at me with teary eyes full of thanks. And when the doors were opened wide enough, he flung himself into my arms. I held Hanuman gently as he was weeping wildly and chattering away incoherently. I looked deeply into his eyes, assuring him that everything would be all right and that he was safe. I felt such a deep love well up inside me that I too began to weep. The remorse I felt for having ignored him was unbearable. I should never have thought of him so uncharitably. As Hannah and I continued to look into each other's eyes, I saw him begin to shift and change. His brown eyes gave way to blue. His fur changed into skin, and soft blondish hair framed his face. A bright yellow dress closed his body. I pulled back in astonishment as I watched Hanneman completely transform into my own 2-year-old daughter. I sat stunned, and I could suddenly understand every word she was saying. She breathlessly told me how she thought she wouldn't find me, and then she couldn't catch up with me when she did find me. She had been so afraid I wouldn't let her in. She thought she would perish and that I wouldn't care since I couldn't see her. I hugged her tightly to me, asking her forgiveness and telling her that I would always see her and I would always love her. We sat clinging to each other with tears that would not stop. The guilt I felt was overwhelming. My mind was numb. How could I have not recognized my own child? Yet she was Hanneman. But how could I have failed to know her energy? How could I have been so cold, so callous, and uncaring as I had acted toward Hanneman? After all, he was a creature who deserved love and care too. How could I forgive myself for such a terrible failing? My tears would not stop. Thank God, that poignant story was only a dream. But I'm betting that it calls to mind instances in each of our histories, I know it did with me, when we have behaved in less than compassionate ways and have felt a depth of remorse that felt inconsolable and almost unforgivable. It's these feelings of true empathy that move us to that place where we're able to think beyond the limits of our individual views, or those shared only by people that are just like us. We're then less likely to minimize the feelings of exclusion or marginalization felt by other people. And we can then seek first to understand their experiences, backgrounds, and circumstances before passing judgment or taking regrettable actions, or maybe worse still, taking no action at all. Of course, the moral of the story is the story of the transformational Hanneman. Is it when we are able to look at the world through the eyes of oneness, we will never see a stranger anywhere in any lifetime. Because when we look at others with the eyes of oneness, we're looking with the heart. The heart knows no strangers. It is a piece of the great Creator itself. And to the heart, every being of life is a child of the universe. If we're one with God, then, like the person in the story, we can begin to consider every person we meet to be our child also, or at least a member of our human family. Even those who bug the living hell out of us. We're then able to better release the idea of strangers as we deepen our comprehension that they are all a part of us as we are a part of them. And when we're truly evolved, not quite there yet, we recognize that those people who bug the living hell out of us are reflecting back to us parts of ourselves that are in need of healing and can actually serve as gifts to our spiritual evolution. And it becomes easier to remember that we all share a common mother, father, creator, universe. We all share a common heart. It is the heart of God. As we consciously choose to release the illusion of duality that causes us to feel separate from each other. And when we experience those moments of absolute oneness, often during times of meditation, we lose ourselves in its light. This has only happened to me once, but I'll never forget it, and I'm looking for it to happen again. where I became one with the universe, and I found no barriers that separated my being from infinite being. And I felt like I was the universe, and the universe was me. These moments are so deliciously exquisite as we float in a freedom and love that is unparalleled. I think we're meant to know this place as our true selves, our inner identity, if you will. And as we live our lives in our biological bodies and share experiences with those around us, we're meant to bring those inner identities out as we share the truth of our being with others, who we truly are. We're meant to live our oneness with every breath we take, with every thought we think, with every word we say, with every action that we take. This is an intention we can all set as we remember the words of Dr. Holmes, who said, "There is one spirit incarnated in everyone, an immortal presence forever expanding everything, causing everything to grow." What a difference it would make, he says, in our human relations if we tried to sense the meaning of this divine incarnation in all people and adjust our viewpoint to the truth that we are all bound together in the unity of God. Humanity and identity, let me do this right. This is Dr. Holmes as well. He says humanity and divinity will be identical when we recognize divinity in humanity. We must learn to see through the apparent, to judge not according to appearances, and to realize that at the center of every person, at the center of the soul of every person, God is enthroned. God is enthroned. Ooh. Compassion and caring are the ties that bind us together in mutual understanding and in the unified attempt to uncover the divinity in one another. And compassion is the most gentle of all human virtues, for it is the outpouring of divine givingness through all. You know, when the members of a community like ours love one another the way you loved Arthur last week, that community is solid and prosperous and happy. Don't you think?
Yes.
Dr. Holmes suggests this. He says, suppose we make a daily habit of feeling that we like people and they like us. We belong to them and they belong to us. In a very real sense, he says, everyone is a member of our own family to love and enjoy. So he says, let's meditate daily on this thought. My desire is that everyone I meet will feel the warmth and color of my affection. My purpose is that a feeling of goodwill shall pass from me to others. Today I embrace the world in this affection and desire so that good shall come to everyone. So I know you're not going to remember all that, so to make it short and sweet, you can just remember the phrase, all my relations, because that covers it all. That covers it all. So I like to close today by reading The Ascent. And this poem was written by a Native American poet whose name is Howard Raynor. He wrote, grab hold and take the hand that reaches out to you. Look up into my eyes. My spirit cries out to you. Friendship is my thought. Let us climb the jagged cliffs of life and fight the ascent of separation together. If I can lift you today, you will look back and grab the hand of 1,000 more. That is the way the Great Spirit would have it. And so it is. Thank you, Cathy. That was beautiful.